Olin and salutations to the Truth Core, whoever and wherever you may be on the planet. I'm here today on June 11th, 2021, to talk about the topic of ET UFO disclosure. So that is the D word, disclosure. It's a big word, highly charged, carries a lot of baggage. But essentially, disclosure is a meme or theme that has been floating around in the collective consciousness for a long time. And it so happens that it came into specific focus in a particular year, and since then it has been developing and mutating in many strange ways. And today it appears as if that topic is coming to a point of some kind of critical revelation, disclosure, some kind of apocalyptic announcement, or some kind of event associated with disclosure. So it's my object in this talk to present you with the unique Gnostic intel that enables us today to take a look at disclosure and to analyze and deconstruct disclosure in a way that cannot be done without reference to the Gnostic intel. The title of this talk is The Gnostic Expose of ET UFO Disclosure. So bear that topic in mind. It tells you right out front that I'm intending to brief you from a Gnostic viewpoint on the event and the narrative of disclosure. And this has never been done publicly before. And no one else can do this in the way that I'm doing it, because no one else has the Gnostic intel that I have that allows me to present something that has never been said before about the theme of disclosure. I'll begin with a brief background on the theme. It goes back to the year 1947, and specifically to the month of July. Now, three things happened simultaneously in July 1947. There was the Roswell incident and the Kenneth Arnold sighting over Mount Rainier, which put the term flying saucer into the realm of collective discussion. That was one event, or two events. The second significant event was the discovery of the significance of the Nag Hammadi codices. The codices themselves, the 13 leather-bound books, were actually discovered in a cave in Egypt in December of 1945. But as I explained in Not in His Image, it was not until July of 1947 when the French archaeologist Jean Jaques was in Cairo that the importance of these documents initially came to light. At that very same time, in July of 1947, the world received the announcement of the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls. And of course, there was a great scandal and cover-up connected with those scrolls. But eventually, as I've also explained in Not in His Image, the scenario and the narrative of the fanatical cult of the Zedekim, who produced the scrolls, came to be unfolded, interpreted, and eventually revealed to the world at large. both the Nag Hammadi codices and the Dead Sea Scrolls present evidence, source evidence, that is absolutely crucial to a sane and intelligent view of ETs, UFOs, and the disclosure of an alien presence in the human world. I've written quite a bit on metahistory.org, and that material is now on Nemada somewhere, about the year 1947, also the year when the CIA was founded, and there was a CIA agent in Cairo at the time who had been sent there specifically, Miles Copeland, I think his name was, to investigate these scrolls, and later on, the actual material possession of the Nag Hammadi codices went to a woman who was the wife of the head of Bechtel, which is an enormous global military-industrial complex. It is truly remarkable, the synchronicity of events and the number of events that happened in 1947 that stand as the background to events that are culminating today. Now, as I present the Gnostic expose of this phenomenon, it will help for you to know that I rely largely on the work of Jacques Vallee. Previous to writing Not in His Image, I read something like 120 books about the ET UFO phenomenon. And I spent about 7 years assessing it and evaluating it before I chose how to incorporate it into the first full and clear public presentation of the genuine Gnostic intel that I find in the Nag Hammadi codices and elsewhere. So I integrated that topic into Not in His Image at a profound level. In doing so, I relied a lot on Jacques Vallee and on his famous trilogy, one of which is called Messengers of Deception. Well, Messengers of Deception is an exact paraphrase of how the Gnostic materials describe the Archons. An exact borrowing. I don't know if Jacques Vallee knew about the Gnostic materials. He may have, and I picked up some clues at the time indicating that possibility. But for whatever reason he chose the term messengers of deception, he was repeating and reinforcing exactly what the Gnostics warned about the Archons. Now, Jacques Vallee made many brilliant insights about the ET UFO phenomenon. And of all of those, I extract one particular statement that he made. You could say it was his master conclusion, which was that the ET UFO phenomenon functions as a, quote, spiritual control system, unquote. You could equally well say it functions as a psyop or a mind control system. Now, Jacques Vallee made this insight with a careful qualification, which I myself hold to strongly. He said, ultimately, it doesn't matter what ETs are. Are they Archons? Are they creatures from another galaxy, from a more advanced civilization? Whatever, there are many theories. And ultimately, it doesn't matter if they have hardware, if they have high technology weapons and flying saucers that enable them to penetrate into the atmosphere of the Earth. Of course, both of those issues are extremely important and need to be discussed and interpreted and analyzed with great scrutiny. But nevertheless, he said, whatever is the case, the theme and the narrative of the ET UFO phenomenon operates as a mind control system, and it does so in the minds of anyone who considers it. Now, how can this be? I can explain the importance of this insight by an analogy. Years ago, when I lived in LA, I used to work off and on at making furniture. I've had no training as a carpenter, but I love to work with wood and work in a wood shop. And I had a small job to make a set of drawers that you put clothes in for a client. Now, although I had never tried before, I decided that I would try to design the chest of drawers, to use some kind of woodworking technique on it, so that it was not merely flat pieces of wood screwed together with drawers to pull out, but that it had some kind of design on the wood. So I went out and I bought a tool called a router. And it's sort of like an electric drill, and it has different attachments. It's a very high-speed rotary tool, a router. And when I got back to the little shop where I was working, I laid out on a table the piece of wood that was going to be part of the chest of drawers, and I wanted to make a kind of attractive ripple design on it, like a wave. And you do that with a specific attachment to the router. It will make a groove in the wood. It will make a rounded groove. So I designed the S-curve that I was going to make, and then all I had to do was use the router, apply the attachment of the router to the line that I had made, and I could engrave or inscribe a lovely S-curve in the piece of wood. Correct? I can assure you that that was the first and last time I ever tried to use the router. Why? Because I discovered that the high rotation of the router, which is necessary in order for it to operate like a handheld lathe and to engrave and shape pieces of wood, carried tremendous torque. Torque, T-O-R-Q-U-E. And so when I turned on the router and placed the bit on the line, I could not control the movement of the router. I could not follow the design I had drawn because the torque of the rotating mechanism of the router was so powerful that it moved my hands itself. It overtook the control of my hands. The ET UFO narrative is like a router in the human mind. Anyone who picks it up and thinks that they can use it in an intentional way and direct it towards some kind of insight or solution will find that the torque of that narrative actually controls the way that they think about it. This is exactly what Jacques Vallee meant. From that analogy, I conclude that everyone on all sides of this debate, which is boiling over right now, as you may know, in anticipation of some kind of government disclosure on the 21st or 25th of this month, everyone, all the three-letter agencies, all the genuinely sincere scientists who are attempting to determine whether or not there is an extraterrestrial civilization that might intervene in our life here on Earth, everyone involved in the SETI project, in the OSMA project, in the Blue Book projects, all of these people, whether they be sincere and honest seekers of truth or whether they be deceivers involved in the cover-up, they are all being controlled by the narrative that they are attempting to manage. However, there is good news. There is a way to master the spiritual or mind control system of this narrative. There is a unique approach to the narrative that only comes out of the Gnostic material. And as I said before, I've never spoken of this publicly in this way before. Although if you read Not in His Image, you can infer from what I say there what I am going to say now. To introduce that approach and show you how to apply it to reach some kind of ultimate sanity about this topic, I'm going to ask you to agree that it is possible that there is an advanced extraterrestrial species located in some other place in the cosmos who have technology, both flying craft and weapons, superior to anything made by human beings. Let's just accept that as a working premise. That being so, the question of ET UFO intervention breaks down into two simple narratives. There are malevolent aliens who have the means and the intention to invade the earth and attack the world. And there are benevolent aliens who have the means and the intention to intervene and assist us or save us from our own problems and our own difficulties. In the latter case, those benevolent ETs would offer their technology, which perhaps is a form of free energy technology, that's plausible, in order to solve many of the problems facing the world regarding the inferiority and the negative side effects of our technology, which to some extent are damaging to the environment and damaging to human health. So in the second scenario, the benevolent ETs would come in basically and save us from ourselves. So the two general plot lines run like that, don't they? They are here to harm us, to invade the earth, and to inflict violence with their superior weaponry, comparable to DEWs, or they are here to help us as benefactors. And of course, dozens and dozens of different sci-fi films have depicted these two plot lines. Now I can assure you that if those were the only two plot lines upon which all the variations of narrative speculation could be developed, there would be no sane solution to the ET UFO enigma. But there is a third plot line. No one discusses this plot line except me. The people who are now investigating this, either honestly and sincerely or for the purposes of deceit, either do not know about the third plot line or they refuse to mention it because, in fact, it is a game changer that would blow their whole program completely out of the water. And that's what I'm going to do right now. Consider for a moment the first scenario. The ETs are malevolent. They have superior flying craft and superior weaponry, and they intend to attack the earth. Were that to be the case, there would be an opportunity for all races and nations and countries and governments in the world to unite against the foreign alien enemy. And haven't you heard that song before? How many times has that been announced? One of the most famous citations which appears on the internet is American President Ronald Reagan saying, what if we were all under threat of attack by an alien extraterrestrial force? Oh, that would actually be a good thing because it would bring us all together, you see. So you see how the malevolent ET invasion plot has been played in many times and many ways. And you can see how, whether or not that was true, whether or not there was a genuine threat of such an alien force, it could be used as a mind control narrative. All that ought to be pretty obvious to you by now if you've looked into this matter and reflected upon it. But when you look closely at the construction of the malevolent ET scenario, when you look closely at that script, there is something that is missing in that script. There is a factor in the plot, or a factor that could be included in the plot, which is never included. Never. And yet the Gnostic intel provides that excluded plot factor. What is it? How is it constructed? Well, it's quite simple. As a matter of fact, as I've shown in Not in His Image and other extensive talks and writings, this additional plot factor, which entirely changes the game, was clearly stated. Despite the pitiful fragmentary condition of the Gnostic source materials that survive, it is there. It is absolutely clear in the Gnostic warning. I call it the Gnostic warning. And you find it stated in various ways in different writings in the Nag Hammadi material, but you also find it explicitly stated in the paraphrase of Irenaeus in his book Against Heresies. So Irenaeus reported what the Gnostics taught about alien intrusion. And what he said is true to what they did teach. They warned that there is on Earth, among the human races, a particular group which has made a pact with the alien and predatory ETs, who represent a true threat, and who today represent a clear and present danger to the entire world. The Gnostics said they exposed the presence of this particular subversive group among the human races, and they described exactly how that group formed a pact with the malevolent aliens. Do you see already how this changes the plot? Every scenario that I've ever heard, correct me if I'm wrong, that raises fear at the possible threat of an alien invasion never mentions the possibility that there are human accomplices in that invasion already at their outposts right here on the earth among us. We are not alone. We are not alone on the earth because we live with the presence of accomplices to the malevolent alien powers. So again, how does this change the narrative? Are you beginning to see? Were it to unfold in the immediate future now, that the aliens who have predatory and harmful intentions toward humanity would actually launch an open attack with flying craft and weapons similar to DEWs, were that to happen in the immediate future, it would happen due to the fact that there is an alien presence already on the earth. There is a presence of accomplices among us who not only invite the malevolent alien attack, but who are fundamental to staging it and bringing it about. That is the plot factor that has not been included in any of the many scenarios of alien invasion that have been discussed lavishly since 1947. Do you see that? Now it is true, and I need to add this qualification, unfortunately true, that the vast majority, the huge preponderance of the world population believes in the existence of UFOs and alien civilizations more advanced than us somewhere else in the cosmos. And in that mass of the population, who might be compared to the preponderant mass of people in the world today who believe in the monster, the mysterious monster microbe. They believe that that monster microbe really exists, you see. Those people, the vast number of people who have succumbed to that psyop, also hold the view that ETs do really exist. And among that group, there are two positions. One, those who believe that the ET intervention would be benevolent. They are space brothers, and they are out there with superior knowledge and superior morality and technology. And at a certain moment, they will appear as the agents of our salvation. But there is another part of the population that fears the alien force out there in the cosmos. But still, in both these cases, those who hold those belief systems have not incorporated the intel that I'm presenting to you right now. They do not take into account that if the case of malevolent alien forces is the true case, that those malevolent alien forces have already established an outpost of accomplices here in the world who welcome them and who have set up humanity to be taken down by those aliens, whom Gnostics called the Archons. So the Gnostic intel clearly states that there is a specific racial group who made a pact with the Archons, who are to be considered genuinely as an alien and hostile presence. The Gnostic intel, as I've developed it, has a lot more to say about the exact character of that presence. What is the nature of the Archons? What is the reality of the rulers, to cite a title of one of the Nag Hammadi texts? What are their motives? How do they operate? The Gnostic intel has a lot to say about that. And also, I have developed an historical narrative describing in great detail how and when this pact was made. You might recall that I spoke about the figure of Melchizedek and the meeting between Melchizedek and the biblical patriarch Abraham, described in the book of Genesis. And I've explained that that event represents the moment about 4,000 years ago, around 1800 BC, when the Archons, the Gnostic Archons, managed to do two things. First, they managed to project through virtual reality technique, or HAL, which is their forte, to project the perfect simulacrum or replica of a human being into the atmosphere of the earth. That's Melchizedek. Melchizedek is not human. It is the perfect simulacrum or replica of a human, but it is not alive. So Melchizedek has no generation, has no parentage. Consider it like a clone or a perfect android replication of the human form, presented as a tall, gaunt, stately figure who projects the ultimate power of authority and Melchizedek is indeed the ultimate power of authority behind Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Remember that the religious ideologies of those three world religions came into the world uniquely through the Semitic languages, Hebrew, Aramaic, and Arabic. So there was, according to the Gnostic Intel, an intrusion. Now I can give you further detail on how this intrusion was achieved, but I'm going to reserve that for another talk soon. In preview of that talk, however, I'll tell you that what the Archons managed to do at that moment was to introduce into the neurological system of their vector race a kind of nanobite technology in the form of invisible or microscopic mites or insects. And they precipitated these insects in the atmosphere of the earth at that place at that time, which happens to be, by the way, and not by accident, the lowest spot on the earth, the region of the Dead Sea. They used the specific conditions of the lowest spot on the earth in order to perform what is called, and this is recorded in science, the abiogenesis of the Akari insects. That was an experiment conducted in England in the 19th century, which proved that microscopic entities, similar to mites, could be generated abiotically, that is, without the presence of life, by certain conditions in a magnetic field. And the Archons did this. So they produced a massive swarm of nanobots. And then, using the delivery system of the milk of aphids, they managed to introduce these nanobots into the neurological system of their vector race. That is how they achieved what I call the Archontic Infection. There is actually an infection, a real infection. It's not a genetic hack, it's a neural hack. And this neural hack is a reality. And so from the moment of that hack, the vector species became, in effect, zombie slaves of the Archons. And they carried out the plan of the Archons, which is master race ideology. You see the reflection of those remote events. Well, it's not actually that remote, less than 4,000 years ago. But you can see the clear reflection and repetition and imitation of those events, because the Archons never originate anything. They always imitate the same MO that they used before. You can see the repetition of the infiltration of nanobots into the human system today in the way that the military pharmaceutical criminal gang are actually using a lipid delivery system to inject into the human organism an artificially bioengineered transgenic agent, the spike protein. So actually, what the archonic proxies in the world today are doing, those who originally made this pact with the Archons and who carry the Archontic Infection as well as their accomplices, what they are doing is simply repeating that feat that took place in the Vale of Salem near the Dead Sea about 4,000 years ago. This time they're using a lipid or gel-like substance to deliver the transgenic agent. What they used in the original event was the milk of aphids. So when this patriarch, Abraham, was in a state of lowered awareness, in a kind of semi-comatose trance or sleep, described specifically in Genesis, leaning against a tree, sleeping, and those around him in the encampment as well, at that moment, the nanobots that had been produced in this bizarre manner by the Archons were absorbed into the milk of aphids. And that milk, that substance, was present in the atmosphere as a fine mist. It was also present on the leaves and branches of bushes. And through contact with that mist, which was called manna in the Old Testament, the people at that time who were chosen as the vector race for the Archontic intrusion absorbed the nanobots through their ears, through their nose, through their eyelids, through their mucous membranes, by saturation of the milk of aphids. The consequence of that tremendous act, a unique act of alien intrusion, was the capture of the neuronal circuits of the vector race. And so, just as today, there is something called magneto-nanotechnology, which uses a lipid medium for delivery, so there was then. The technology of today, implemented through injections, is simply a variation of that same technology. And as a result of that, the nanobite particles produced by the Archons captured the neuronal circuits of those people at that time and became inherent to their neurological and genetic constitution so that it could be reproduced through generations. Back in 2014, I described in my talk on the Archontic Infection on a platform that cannot be named, how the nanobots, these nanoparticles, through which the Archons remotely control the infected race, captured the neuronal circuits of the human brain, and that intrusion, the evidence of that intrusion, is present today in the brains of those people, and it veils itself behind the neurochemical L-DOPA. However, since autopsies are forbidden according to the protocols of the religion of that particular group, or as long as autopsies are forbidden, it would not be possible to scientifically prove what I'm saying. In conclusion, and to bring it around again to the central point, which is the takeaway of this talk, the Gnostics warned that the Archontic intrusion occurred initially in that way. Those who carried the Archonic infection developed into a cult called the Zadokим. And one of the great revelations of the Dead Sea Scrolls was that the Zadokim was a flying saucer cult. I'm not making that up. It's written clearly in the Thanksgiving hymns from Qumran and in other documents from those source materials. The scenario of the war scroll, which I describe extensively in Not in His Image, depicts a moment, the apocalyptic moment, when Melchizedek, who was the agent of the primary intrusion, appears with the Keноshim, angels who ride shining, spinning, wheeled chariots in the sky. And the fanatics of the Zadokim cult of the Dead Sea anticipated the moment when this would happen. That was their ultimate apocalyptic moment. In fact, you find the scenario for UFO intervention, for an actual attack by hardware, prescripted and predicted in the War Scroll from the Dead Sea. It's there for everyone to see. The evidence is there. There's nothing mysterious about it. And what I'm telling you is not a bizarre twist or dubious interpretation. It's a literal reading of the script. Everything that I'm saying here comes down to the clear and present danger of this moment, signaled by the solar eclipse of June 10th, which, by the way, also signals the way to overcome this narrative and the way to break out of the mental control system or the archontic psyop of the ET UFO threat. Is there a real threat that the Archons, who inhabit the solar system exclusive of the Earth, could now come and attack the Earth with their hardware and their superior weapons? Well, according to the Gnostic intel, no, that is not possible as a literal fact. But something else is possible, which is a false flag UFO attack using DEWs created by human beings right here on Earth and controlled, in fact, by the very group who are the heirs and inheritors of the apocalyptic insanity of the Dead Sea cult, who also happen to be, needless to say, the specific group who are in control of the directed energy weapons that would be used in such a false flag attack. Making sense? So the takeaway here is quite simple. Whatever is going to be disclosed in the immediate future, if it does happen to be a statement coming from the authorities that the world stands before the threat of a UFO attack, then you will know what no one else knows, which is that the script for that attack has been written centuries ago, and you can read it in the Dead Sea Scrolls. And so if the Zadokim cult wrote the script for that attack, anticipating the ultimate triumph of Melchizedek, anticipating the coming of the Keноshim in flying chariots, then you can see that the only way this psyop could succeed is by complete ignorance of the fact that the invading Archon ETs actually have human accomplices who are inviting them and who have set up the event of their invasion for centuries in advance. And if you see that, it gets even better, because you can see then, you can conclude that the disclosure of a UFO attack can only be a psyop, and such an attack, if it does occur in the immediate future, can only be an event that is staged by the Archontic accomplices here among us, and cannot be actually attributed to any external alien threat. Enough said, and I'll be seeing you in the beauty to come.